الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين. في سورة الأعراف الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول: والوزن يومئذ الحق فمن ثقلت موازينه فأولئك هم المفلحون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and the weighing of deed on that day will be the truth. So those whose scale are heavy, it is they who will be the successful. The scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth. And to be successful in this dunya and the hereafter, you need to calibrate your scale to the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala determined the status of people based on two things: knowledge and al-ilm wal-amal, knowledge and deeds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم يرفع الله الذين آمنوا وأوتوا العلم منكم درجات. Allah will elevate those who believe and have knowledge, elevate them in the status. So they have different status, depend on their knowledge. And as far as al-amal, deeds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِكُلٍّ دَرَجَاتٌ مِمَّا عَمِلُوا. For all they have levels, depend what they did. So knowledge and deeds. So you'll be successful when you adapt that scale, when you calibrate your scale to the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and use the scale to evaluate your life, evaluate people around you. And for example, if someone wants to marry your daughter, what scale do you use? Do you use the scale of this dunya? You look for someone who is rich, although his deen is not so much? Or do you use the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowledge and good deed and righteousness? What scale? If you want to have a partner working for you in your company, or you want to hire someone to work for your company, what scale do you use? Do you use scale of this, that he's my cousin, maybe I should hire him, although there's someone more qualified? And that's not the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very fair. And a lot of us, subhanAllah, sometimes we favor people, certain people over other people just because, they're our family or our neighbors. Maybe there is someone who's more qualified. What scale do we use? Like that, sometimes we have double standard. For example, a woman may have a daughter-in-law and have a daughter. Double standard. She would be so happy if her daughter or husband bring a lot of stuff, but if her son brings stuff for his wife, she has double standard. What scale is she using, right? So you have to calibrate your scale to the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth, the ultimate fairness. And in Islam, what determines our scale is shara, not your opinion, not the culture, not the social norm. What determines your action, when you want to weigh your actions, you weigh them according to Islam, to Sharia. Not progressive, liberal, or start labeling people as old-fashioned. Don't care what people think. Care what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks. So you calibrate your scale based on the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And every deed has a weight, and every person has a weight. Every deed has a weight, and the weight of the deed is determined by the intention. You have to be sincere for the sake of Allah. Is determined by the depth of its effect, the extent of its effect, the continuity of its effect. For example, if you donate to build an Islamic school, your intention for the sake of Allah, you pass the first one. And then that school will teach generation after generation. So your deed is very deep. And how many people are benefiting? What geographic area this school is covering? That's extent of the deed. And the continuity of the deed after you die, and that school is still, students are graduating generation after generation, you're accumulating good deed even after you die. See how your deed is very heavy when you do something like this? And every human being has a weight. For example, if you get two people who are generous, if someone, let's say, have $1,000 in their pocket and they donate $200, is the same as someone who has $10 million and they donate $1,000. See the difference? So generosity, when you don't have much, has a higher weight than generosity when you have a lot. Same. when you are humble, despite your status or despite you're wealthy, but humble has more weight. Having taqwa in a young man has more weight than taqwa in an old man. Because a young man has full of desire that's, so when you have taqwa in a young man, it has more weight. And when, whenever your scale is when you try to calibrate your scale, that sign of your iman. كلما زاد إيمانك دق ميزانك. When your iman is high, your scale is very tight on your deeds and yourself. You monitor yourself. For example, that's why the believer see his sins are like mountains on his chest. But the hypocrite, no matter what sins they do, they don't feel it. And the same, for example, if you have to weigh gold, use a very, very accurate weight, like in grams. But when you weigh cars, use weigh in tons. So the same as a believer has a very tight scale. They evaluate their deed, they monitor themselves. That's different than the hypocrite, and or people who are used to committing sins. So you want to be successful, calibrate your scale and use the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in evaluating yourself, evaluating others. And you have to understand that Jannah has a price. And the price is to have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه الحمد لله رب العالمين.